Dear Dr Gundry, you are so welcome back to Livsenergi. Hello, how are you?
Good, great to be back. See you again, talk to you.
Yeah, it's very nice. So, it's approximately a year since we had our last conversation.
Yeah.
Back then you were in Italy.
That's right.
You remember?
Good memory, yeah.
And it sounded lovely. You had some good treks with your wife and some good food.
Yes, absolutely. They're well known for their good food. Very true.
Yeah, they are. And we ended that interview with you giving us a teaser about unlocking the keto code. So this is this book.
Correct.
Is this your doing?
That's my latest one. That's correct.
Yeah. And that's why we're here today. Because it's coming out in the end of January. It's coming out in Swedish.
Great.
We're super happy about it. And it's got great reviews on Amazon. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So it was actually, I just checked today. So it was launched on the 8th of March.
Yes.
On International Women's Day.
That's correct. Very true.
You know, we have a lot of women in our book club. You know our book club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have a lot of women here. I think we're like 97% women. And we have a big group of Gundry loyal members.
Oh my, oh dear. Well, that's actually great to hear.
Yeah, of course. Of course. We like you so much. And I think one of the reasons is because you're creating books that are funny to read, smart, with lots of good information for us to live healthy and happy lives. And, reading about this, not boring subject, but it could be heavy scientific information, and you're making it so nice and easily accessible. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's what, supposedly I'm known for taking a very difficult, deep scientific subject and making it approachable and understandable. So, we tackled, ketogenic diet in much the same way.
Exactly. So can you give us your elevator pitch about unlocking the keto code?
Yeah, the elevator pitch is most people think of a ketogenic diet as a ultra high fat, low protein, low carbohydrate diet. And traditionally, the ketogenic diet was used to treat childhood seizure disorders. And it was an 80% fat diet. It was actually very, very effective for treating childhood seizure disorder.
What kind of disorder is that?
Seizures.
Seizure. Oh.
Yeah. And this was actually started in the 1930s when there were no medications for seizures like phenobarbital or Dilantin. And these children had really no other option. And it was noted that children would have such incessant seizures that they'd basically almost be in a coma, and they wouldn't eat for several days. And during that time, they would eventually wake up, and their well-meaning parents would feed them, and when they fed them, they'd start having seizures again. So some researchers in Boston said, gee, when people aren't eating, they're making these compounds called ketones, ketone bodies. And we know this happens when you're starving, and maybe these ketone bodies are doing something with the brain to protect against seizures. And the only other way that anybody knew to produce ketones was to really deprive someone of carbohydrates and proteins, and to mainly have them eat fat. And then the liver would make ketone bodies. So it turns out that these kids eating an 80% fat diet had very good control of their seizures. But as any parent knows, as any grandparent knows, it's virtually impossible to get a child to avoid carbohydrates, sugars. And as I've learned from 25 years of doing this with my patients, it's virtually impossible to get an adult to avoid carbohydrates.
Yeah, try me.
And, you know, when you look at the success with keto diets, 60% of people stop the diet within a month of starting because it's just not a doable proposition, eating all of this fat. So what I decided to do was actually look at, well, what were ketones doing that actually produced the desirable results, such as weight loss? And it turns out that ketones aren't some fantastic fuel that we should always try to make. They're actually what are called signaling molecules. Yeah. And these signaling molecules tell our mitochondria, which are the energy-producing organelles in all of our cells, to protect themselves from damage and to, believe it or not, waste energy rather than conserve energy, to literally waste fuel. And I go into the book describing how mitochondria make energy, and I call it the Mito Club, which is the hippest, coolest nightclub that everybody wants to go to. And it's pretty crazy and wild in there, and fights break out, and there's got to be a way to diffuse all this high energy. And there's actually emergency exits in the Mito Club. So if things get too crazy, people can get out before somebody gets hurt. And strangely enough, mitochondria have emergency exits where we can literally act like pop-off valves in a pressure cooker, where mitochondria can prevent getting hurt. And as in all my other books, it turns out that preventing mitochondria from getting hurt, preventing mitochondrial damage, probably underlies almost everything to keep us healthy for a very long time. It's critical for our brain. It's, believe it or not, critical to prevent cancer from forming. And so ketones do this, but there are other ways to do this besides eating a high-fat diet. And that's the exciting thing, I think, particularly for my female readers.
Yeah.
It's interesting, most females do not think that eating a pound of cheddar cheese melted on bacon, followed by a half-pound fatty burger 3 times a day is something that you want to do every day.
Perhaps it creates some kind of process, but you have to feel good as well while doing this ketogenic diet.
Yeah, and we've, I have a number of patients who have done traditional ketogenic diets, and yes, they do lose weight, but we can see very distinct changes in their blood work. They actually get surprisingly more inflammation rather than less. And we see almost universally that the inside of their blood vessels actually get sticky and attract cholesterol. And that's something that I don't want, and I certainly don't want my patients to have. So we looked at alternative ways. And one of the ways, which I've written about before, is that we can make ketones by consuming medium chain triglycerides, MCT oil. And MCT oil is a fat, unlike any other fat, that goes directly to our liver and is converted into ketones without any other factor. And the nice thing about MCT oil is it's a liquid, it's flavorless, it's tasteless. You can mix it with salad dressings, you can pour it on vegetables, you can even take a spoonful of it. But what's one of the big surprising things is that medium chain triglycerides are actually named after the Latin word for goat, capra. And it turns out that goat and sheep cheeses and yogurts are about 30% of their fat are MCT oils. And so in a culture that likes cheeses as much as you do, it turns out if I can get you to have some goat and sheep cheeses or some goat and sheep yogurts, you'll automatically make a good amount of ketones from eating those foods.
Thank you very much. You know, you made me, or it's actually thanks to you that I drink goat milk in my coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And so goat milk is loaded with MCTs. And so it's an easy way to get MCTs. The other thing that I've written a lot about and in this book is the shorter we make our eating window during the day from the time we break fast, have our first meal of the day, break our fast, to the end of the day, if we can compress that window down to 6 to 8 hours, at least during the week, it allows for a longer period of making ketones in a 24-hour period. And I talk about some very elegant rat studies at the National Institutes of Health that prove this, and a really fascinating Italian cyclist study where they took Italian athletes, cyclists, and they put them on a training table where everybody had to eat the exact same food for 3 months. And the only thing they changed was one group had to eat all their meals in a 12-hour eating window. They had to start at 8 o'clock in the morning and they had to finish by 8 o'clock at night. 12 hours of eating, 12 hours of not eating. The other group had only a 7-hour eating window. And so they had a 17-hour window of not eating. Same food. The group that had the compressed eating window actually lost weight. The other group lost no weight, even though they were all exercising the same, they were all eating the same calories. And the group that had the compressed eating window not only lost weight, but they had markers of longevity activated in their blood just by changing the time period of eating. And that's because
it's quite easily done. I mean, it's just postponing break fast a bit until perhaps not, maybe skip it or just give it some more time, 10 o'clock in the morning, and then you have until 6 p.m. at night to eat your dinner.
Yeah, that's correct. And there's been studies done at the University of Chicago that if you just compress your eating window during the week and then take the weekend off when you're with friends and family, that'll work just fine. And in the book, what I do is I take people and hold their hand and say, okay, maybe you eat breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the last thing I want you to try is waiting until noon to eat breakfast, because a lot of people fall flat on their face. They get weak, they get a headache, they get grouchy, they get hangry, as we say. So we do this actually 1 hour at a time each week. So sure, okay, let's say you like to eat breakfast at 8 o'clock. Well, it's not too hard to wait until 9 o'clock to eat breakfast. And then we do that for a week. And then the next week, we wait until 10 o'clock. We do that for a week. And if we're stumbling, okay, we go for 9:30 instead of 10 o'clock. There's no hard and fast rules. But it's amazing. Most people over the course of a few weeks can easily get to having their break fast at 11 o'clock, even noon. And that really makes a big difference. The final thing in the book is that there are compounds that I write a lot about in plants that are called polyphenols. And polyphenols are all these exuberant colors that You recently had in the fall that we see in leaves, all the yellows and oranges and reds and purples. And those are the polyphenols. And we see them in fruits and vegetables. These really,
Bright colors.
yeah, these bright colors.
Yeah.
These polyphenols actually were designed by plants to protect the mitochondria of plants from damage from sunlight, of all things. And when we eat polyphenols from plants, we don't absorb polyphenols very well, but it turns out our gut bacteria think they are absolutely delicious and they really like to eat polyphenols. They're a prebiotic for gut bacteria. And the gut bacteria, in turn, make those polyphenols accessible to us. And what's fascinating is these polyphenols that are designed to protect plant mitochondria protect human mitochondria. And you start looking at, say, the Mediterranean diet, which clearly has some major health benefits. So much of the Mediterranean diet is polyphenol rich. For instance, olive oil is loaded with polyphenols. Espresso, black coffee, is loaded with polyphenols. Tea is loaded with polyphenols. Dark chocolate is loaded with polyphenols. Red wine is loaded with polyphenols, and all these colorful fruits and vegetables. So we're beginning to realize that this eating the rainbow in our diet is actually because we're getting these polyphenols in our diet that protect our mitochondria. And you get a bonus is, in general, it makes you lose weight. So why not? Why not?
Yeah, why not? So thank you. That was the keto code, or unlocking the keto code in a nutshell, you could say.
Yep.
So this is a book about health. I want to see the weight loss thing as a good bonus. But so the ketogenic diet, to follow that, is also a big health aspect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It turns out that the reason you want to have ketone production is actually for long-term health. And the more the signaling, the code, unlocking the keto code, is the ketones are merely signaling mitochondria to protect themselves, to repair themselves. And the more we give mitochondria the tools and the information to protect themselves and to repair themselves, the longer we live, and most importantly, the longer we live well. Like my book, The Longevity Paradox, what we want to do is we want to die young at a ripe old age. And, most of us want to live a long time, but none of us want to get old. And that's the sad thing. We look around, particularly at Western societies, and getting old doesn't look very good. Hip replacements and knee replacements, and maybe ending up in a nursing home and, not remembering your name or your family's name. That is not appealing to us for obvious reasons. But what's exciting is we know from looking at very old people and very old civilizations and towns that you can, be 105 years old and still herd sheep on a mountain in Sardinia, and run after the sheep as if there's nothing wrong with you. And there isn't anything wrong with these people. There's fascinating that I talk about in the book. This process of protecting mitochondria is called mitochondrial uncoupling.
Yes.
And
Frikoppling in Swedish.
Yeah, very close. Yeah. And people, at least in the United States, Gwyneth Paltrow uncoupled her last marriage. And so that's not the kind of uncoupling we're talking about. But it turns out that mitochondrial uncoupling is probably one of the key factors in living a very healthy long time. In fact, when you look at these 105-year-old people around the world, they have the most uncoupled mitochondria of anybody else. And one of the things I talk about in the book, which is kind of fun, there's a theory of aging that's very popular, and it's called the cost of living hypothesis. And the cost of living hypothesis basically says the faster your metabolic rate, the shorter you live. And that rule is pretty good. Little bitty animals have a very fast metabolic rate, and they don't tend to live very long. Big animals like humans, like elephants, in general, have a very much slower metabolic rate. And yes, we tend to live much longer. The exception to that rule is birds. Birds are small. A hummingbird is tiny. A hummingbird has an incredibly high metabolic rate. A hummingbird heart beats 1,100 times per minute.
Crazy.
And yet a hummingbird in captivity can live 12 years, about the same as our dogs, a much bigger animal. And parrots can live 80 to 100 years.
Oh.
And yet, yeah. And so when people said, well, how can that be? It turns out that birds have very uncoupled mitochondria. And they actually uncouple their mitochondria because of the nectars, like the hummingbird drinks, those brightly colored flowers, and a lot of the seeds that birds eat and nuts actually have lots of polyphenols in them. And so birds live a long time because they're uncoupled.
That's against the plant paradox.
Oh no, we like certain seeds. For instance, flax seeds are great for you. Right. Sesame seeds are great for you.
And perhaps birds also can take.
Yeah, birds actually have a different metabolism.
Yeah.
But and it turns out millet, which is one of our grains in the plant paradox, is often called birdseed, because birds eat millet. So.
That's perfect. Yeah, and that's the answer to the subtitle to this book, The Revolutionary New Science of Keto That Offers More Benefits Without Deprivation. So without deprivation, so that actually means that we can eat better during this keto.
That's exactly right. You can have far more carbohydrates and far more protein and far less fat than you would have and still get the benefits of a high fat diet just by learning, okay, what are these compounds that are going to give you the benefit of a ketogenic diet without all the suffering, because most people get really bored with a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, I haven't even tried it just because I'm no good with fat. I love olive oil and, oils and stuff, but I am very sensitive to wrong oil and wrong fat. So I have a hard time going to certain restaurants and eating their food because I get bad. I get sick. So, so that's why this book opens up a whole new possibility for me. I can actually try a ketogenic diet if I want to. And I think it's interesting, especially, I'm thinking certain times during the year, you feel that you gain weight because you eat a lot over Christmas, for example. It's a lot of fatty food with a lot of salt and candy on top of that. So 2 weeks after Christmas, I feel awful. So well, not just me. I think a lot of people.
Most people.
most people are very into changing certain things to get back to oneself again, to know oneself and feel oneself. And
No,
that's
you're right. In the United States, we have a Thanksgiving holiday, which is at the end of November. And in the United States, between the end of November and New Year's, which is about 5 weeks, the average American gains 5 pounds. They gain a pound a week. And you're right. Most people go, why did I do that? But, there's parties and everybody wants you to try this, and everybody's nice to you, and they bring cookies to you, and they bring boxes of candy, and it's hard to say no. And you're right. It's and this happens. It happens in Europe. It happens in most westernized countries.
Yeah, of course it does. So would you say, is this something you live by? I mean, you live by all your books, but is it something that you can also do in certain periods of the year?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think people, if they've been reading my books, know that ordinarily, we in great apes would normally gain weight in the summer and early fall when fruits would ripen, and great apes and us can take fruit and convert it into fat. In fact, great apes only gain weight during fruit season, and we have a mechanism to convert fructose into fat. On the other hand, most of the time, great apes and us should be losing weight during the winter because there wouldn't have been much food in the winter back in the old days. Of course, now we have 365 days of endless summer, and food-wise, and so that's very hard to do. But what I've done, actually now, I think it'll be my 24th year of doing this. From January through June every year, I only eat one meal a day during the week. I compress my eating window down to about 2 hours. And so 22 out of 24 hours, I'm not eating. Now, am I starving to death? No, I have absolutely no hunger. Am I weak? No. There's beautiful papers that show it actually increases your energy. Why do I do that? Well, I do a reset. I usually gain about 10 pounds during the summer and fall, and then I take it off during the winter. And I'm trying to duplicate what our ancient ancestors did. We would purposely gain weight when food was available, and then we take it off because there wasn't any food. And I think this cycling is actually built into our existence. And when I turn 150, I'll let you know if it worked out okay.
That's a good idea. I hope I'll be here to listen to you then.
Absolutely.
We can make a deal.
We'll keep doing this every year.
Yes. Good idea.
We'll check in.
It's a good idea. So we've talked a lot about the keto, understanding the first generation. Can we say that? We have the first generation of ketogenic diet, and this is perhaps the second generation.
Yeah, and in fact, my impetus for doing this, even in the Plant Paradox, my monster bestseller, there's a ketogenic chapter, and that ketogenic diet uses MCT oil as one of its foundations. And why is that? Well, when drugs came out to treat seizures, the high fat diet for kids, kind of died a horrible death because kids they want carbohydrates. But these drugs are not great. They actually kind of suppress the way your brain works and thinks. And in the 1990s, which was not too long ago, the ketogenic diet for kids had a resurgence, but this time they found that they could give kids MCT oil instead of pure high fat and have the same results because MCTs would instantly make ketones. And so they could give the kids more carbohydrates and more proteins, and the kids were much happier, and it still worked. So I took that research and said, this is a way to get people more of the things they really want, which are carbohydrates and some proteins, but still get the benefits of signaling to mitochondria to uncouple. And that's, again, unlocking the keto code. Once you know that ketones have a code that they tell mitochondria what to do, you can break that code and tell mitochondria what to do without this miserable high-fat diet. So, yeah, so it's probably keto 2.
Keto tune, yeah. So you are a master of breaking down scientific stuff to digestible stuff. It's really nice. Thank you very much.
And that's a great pun. It's digestible, correct?
Yes. So, what are your 3 best tips to get started on a ketogenic diet? And why?
Yeah, the easiest way to start is to gradually, slowly push your first meal a day closer and closer towards noon. And take your time. That's really one of the easiest, quickest ways to get started.
So the window where we are not eating, we want that to be around 12, 14 hours?
12 and 14 hours will not work. That's what most people don't realize. You actually have to get out to about 16, even 17 hours a day to get the benefits of this. Again, the Italian athletes, the one group had a 12-hour fasting window, and it had no effect. And I have a lot of patients who tell me, oh, I have a 12-hour eating window and, I'm doing ketogenic diet. No, you're not. And we can show them on their blood work that it's not having the effect they're looking for.
So breakfast at 10, dinner at 6, we would be all set. Or
yeah,
12.
You'd be fine. Try to get the breakfast 10 to 12. Try to finish dinner by 6 or 7, and we'll be all set. Yeah.
It's doable. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to, wait till 10 or 11 o'clock the first week. Just if you ate breakfast at 8, eat it at 9 and try that for a week, and then push to 9:30 the next week or 10, and take your time. We spend 5 weeks in the book holding people's hands, getting them to farther out before they break their fast with breakfast.
Very important thing here, though. Can we have the coffee with the goat milk earlier?
So what I like people to do is, rather than goat milk, use actually goat yogurt, or even goat yogurt with MCT oil. And I even have a recipe for a cappuccino where we blend goat yogurt or even goat cheese with coffee in a blender, very, very much like bulletproof coffee. But it turns out the goat will have far better benefits than butter, believe it or not.
So that does not break the fast?
Does not break the fast. In fact, there's good work from Professor Walter Longo, who's a colleague of mine in Southern California, showing that even a handful of nuts does not break the fast in human volunteers. So, and believe it or not, the best nut for protecting your mitochondria is pistachio nuts. Pistachios actually have the highest melatonin content of any food. And melatonin, which most people think about as a sleep hormone,
yes,
is actually one of only 2 antioxidants in our mitochondria. Mitochondria use melatonin to protect themselves, along with another antioxidant called glutathione. but melatonin you can swallow.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, the Mediterranean diet is rich in melatonin. Olive oil has melatonin in it. Mushrooms loaded with melatonin. Even coffee has melatonin in it, surprisingly, because so melatonin is great for repairing mitochondria.
Perfect. So that is tip number 1, decrease your window of eating. Perfect.
Number 2 is eat the rainbow. The more rainbow containing leaves that you can get in you, the better. The more polyphenol supplements that you can get into you, the better.
Red beets.
Yeah, beetroot extract is great. Grapeseed extract is great. There's a very famous compound in red wine called resveratrol, which you can take as a supplement. Sadly, to get the benefits of resveratrol in red wine, you'd have to have multiple bottles of red wine per day, and I do not recommend that for multiple reasons.
Good. But you do actually say that it's okay to have a glass of red wine now and then. So that's nice.
Absolutely. I force myself to have a glass of red wine with dinner every night for its medicinal purposes only.
Of course. So is there another tip?
So the other tip is whenever you can, get MCT oil and put it, on your vegetables, in your salad. The really cool thing about MCT oil is it instantly makes ketones. And again, ketones tell mitochondria to uncouple and protect themselves. And that really is one of the fundamental ways of getting into ketosis. Finally, and I spend a great deal of time in the book talking about this, the gut microbiome likes to eat soluble fibers. And when they eat soluble fibers, which are prebiotics, they make a class of compounds called short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids not only can be turned into ketones, but more importantly, they're incredibly useful for uncoupling mitochondria. And so the more soluble fiber-rich foods that we eat, the better our microbiome behaves and the more of these compounds they make. And that in turn protects our mitochondria. In fact, some of these compounds, like butyrate, is so important for preventing cancer that there are studies of giving butyrate to animal models of cancer, and it just stops cancer cell replication in its track. Also, butyrate is the single most important fuel for the lining of our gut. And butyrate is also incredibly important for our brain, our neurons. And it all comes from these bacteria in our gut eating prebiotic fiber. So feed your bacteria, and they in turn will feed you the things you need for long life.
Can you give us 3 examples of where we get this?
Yeah, so numerous vegetables are rich in this sort of fiber. Asparagus is rich in this fiber. Onions and leeks are rich in this fiber. In the south of France and in Italy and in Greece, there are a class of vegetables called chicory. And chicory, radicchio, some people call it that Italian red lettuce, frisee, that those are all rich in this sort of fiber. Jerusalem artichokes are rich in this fiber, sometimes called sunchokes. Belgian endive is rich in this
Oh,
fiber.
so good.
Yeah. And so all of these compounds, the more we can get these sorts of foods into our diet, and a lot of these compounds, like Belgian endive, is delicious roasted. Most people think of it as raw, as in a salad. But in the winter, it's great fun to roast it or grill it, and it's really a comfort food. So,
So, and you have all this in the book. You have the lists of where to find all this good stuff that we want to feed our stomachs with, and you have the recipes.
yeah.
So, and all the fantastic fact that we want to know in this funny and smart way. So this book is a fantastic read. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so, and after the first of the year, when this comes out in Swedish, is a great time to get started. We're all motivated, and it's just I'm glad it's coming out then, because we can dive right in, and Swedes have a great lifespan as a general rule, and we're going to make it even better.
Definitely. So we can we can actually do the same period as you do. So
Yeah.
January to June, and then we can have fun afterwards, but we can have fun meanwhile as well.
Exactly. This is not, what I've found through the years is that what I want people to have is a lifestyle that they can live with, literally and figuratively. This is not about deprivation. This is not about punishment. This is not about becoming a monk. This is about eating great food that in turn feeds our most important little cellular organisms called the mitochondria and our microbiome.
It's fabulous to get the knowledge to actually serve our bodies so well. It's great that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's well worth doing too.
So 2 minutes about you, Stephen Gundry, Dr. Stephen Gundry. What happened in the last year? What did you do? Anything special?
Well, I guess my wife and I had a COVID travel revenge where we spent we missed traveling for 2 years, so we spent actually quite a bit of time in Italy and in the south of France. My wife speaks pretty fluent French, so she loves France, and we go around and find these little villages and find out what people cook, what people eat. So a lot of it is just discovery, and we love to hike. We'll hike the foothills and mountains of Italy and France for 10, 15 miles every day. And so we don't hole up in a hotel by the pool. People go, why don't you do that? Well, that's not our idea of a great time. And I just got back recently from Paris, where we finally, after 2 years, had the large microbiome conference that's in Paris every year, which was shut down because of COVID. And I presented a paper there about reversing autoimmune disease with my program, and it's been very effective in reversing just about any autoimmune disease you care to name. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, 2,500 years ago, said all disease begins in the gut, and he was right. And I paraphrase him to say all disease can end in the gut if we take care of our gut.
So now it's Christmas time. Are you going to spend it at home?
Believe it or not, we got invited at the last minute to go to a hotel in Lake Como in northern Italy called Villa d'Este, which is just below George Clooney's house. And it's the 150th anniversary of the founding of the hotel. So we got an invitation to come for Christmas Eve and Christmas. So we're going to get the family gathered before Christmas in just a couple days, and then we're going to jet off and go to that. So that could be very interesting.
I'm not envious. You know, Lake Como is one of the spots I would love to have a place in, but it's too expensive. But it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous spot.
Close to the mountains, go skiing, and close to the heat as well.
Yeah, it's a really great place. So hopefully I'll post on Instagram.
We will have a look. Definitely.
All right.
Dr. Gundry, I want to thank you for this time. I hope to see you again.
Now let's go. It's over. Let's get me back to Sweden one of these days.
Yeah, that would be nice. Do you want to say something to your Swedish audience?
Well, thank you so much. For whatever reason, I seem to be very popular with you and your audience. And thank you so much for reading my books and following my books. I literally see patients 6 days a week, even on the weekends. And on the 7th day, I don't rest. I go to Gundry MD, my supplement and food company. And I do this because I'm still a kid in a candy store. I get to see literally miracles every day from people following my advice and reversing illnesses that they really had no feeling that they had a hope of reversing, or just feeling better, living better. And so that's why, I get up every morning, and I'll keep doing it. I have no plans to retire. And I'm working on the next book right now.
Oh, really? What is that about?
It's really a very deep dive into how our gut microbiome controls every aspect of our lives, and how we can manipulate that gut microbiome for our benefit and their benefit. And if we give the gut microbiome what they want, they in turn will take care of us because we're their home. And so it's a guidebook to the care and feeding of the most important organ in us, and that is our microbiome.
It's going to be very fun to have a look at. So it sounds like it's a deeper dive than the plant paradox and the energy paradox together.
Deeper and deeper and deeper. It's
but
almost
still understandable to someone like me.
Oh, you're going to love it. I mean,
yeah,
people don't realize that single cell organisms exert profound behavioral changes on our free will, on our brain. We're now absolutely convinced that most anxiety and depression is not a brain problem. It's a gut dysbiosis problem. It's the absence of these compounds that are made by the gut that keep our brain happy. And it goes into how we can fix all this. Yeah.
What comes to mind, I'm not going to take much more of your time, Dr. Gundry, but what comes to mind is, kids, teenagers, they eat really bad food. I mean, even in Sweden, I would say I have 3 of them. 2 of them eat really bad food. So it's lots of sodas. It's no veggies whatsoever. It's perhaps a hamburger, homemade still, but anyways. And I don't know, how would you say we can help them? Because they have a problem with concentration in school, and it's a problem. What should we do?
And that's actually a whole lot about the book. These problems never occurred until about 50 years ago. And the book really goes into why this is now really a universal problem. It's not just Americans. We just happen to have access to guns, so we can kill each other. But the crisis of kids' mental health is real. I mean, around the world, except in places that don't eat like us, where this is incredibly unusual behavior. A lot of it has to do the more you as a parent can give foods that are organic, that preferably were grown locally, that came from a farmer's market, even if it's junk food, it's a lot better for them than if something came in a package. Try to get it away from them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Our grandparents, our great grandparents ate whole foods,
Yeah.
and they ate them whole. And just because something says whole wheat and it's a piece of bread, it's not whole anymore. And we've just made that mistake. So anyhow,
Yeah.
but that's what the book's about. Tricks on how to turn this around.
Wonderful. I'm going to let you go.
Thank you. I unfortunately got to do a podcast in just a few minutes, so I'll take a
That's
break.
what's so cool about you. You're everywhere and you're doing everything so great. Dr. Gundry, you have the podcast, you have your books, you're everywhere and you give us so much information, and I'm really, truly super happy.
Well, thank you. And it's great to see you again, and great to see all your listeners and my fans. And I'll get back to Sweden, I promise. It's a
Yes, please do.
phenomenal place. All right.
Please do. Merry Christmas to you and Happy New Year.
Same to you. All right. And let's all get started in the new year with unlocking the keto code.
Yes. Good. Bye-bye.
Take care.
You too.